Hi there, trailer owners. Today in your 2017 Grand Design Reflection, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Dexter's E-Z Flex equalizers. And this is what our equalizers look like when they're installed. Compared to your factory equalizers, these have a dampener here in the middle, so whenever one axle goes to move, it doesn't directly affect the other one, but a lot of that force that it would be transferring from one axle to the other is absorbed by the shock absorber pad here in the middle. Your standard equalizer is going to be just like this, so it's completely solid. So if this axle hits something and moves it up, this one, it has to force this side down. But with the cushion in here, we can squish the cushion, so we're not transferring all that force directly over to here. And when it does squish, it's also absorbing a lot of that force, so it's not transferred inside the vehicle, which greatly smooths out our ride and reduces any shock that you would feel inside the cabin. These are mainly designed to help out your trailer's ride. You will notice a small improvement in the way it pulls behind you in your vehicle, but most of it you're going to notice on the items that you have inside your trailer. A lot of your cabinets that may be full with dishes or drawers that you may have that aren't held shut. A lot of times they open and close when you're driving down the road. By minimizing all that shock, it helps minimize all the movement of the items inside your trailer, which can help keep things from breaking and also help keep things in place so you don't have such a mess when you get to your destination. This kit's not just an upgrade for the ride quality of your trailer, but also for the life of the components on your suspension system. You'll receive new hardware for each end of your leaf spring, along with new bushings. And the new hardware has grease fittings inside of it, so they are going to be greasable. This is going to reduce noise because we're not going to have as much metal-on-metal contact, and it's also going to greatly increase the life of the bushings because we're going to have that protective layer of grease keeping them from wearing each other down. And that's going to be the same on every pivot point on your system, so you can feel sure that you're not going to have to worry about any of these bushings wearing out, causing clunks from the bushings disappearing from the metal-on-metal contact, so you'll have a much quieter, smoother ride for years to come. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's go over the installation together so you can have the confidence to do it at home. We'll begin our installation by lifting our trailer up and supporting it on jack stands. You can use your floor jack to do so. If you have levelers on here, you can also use those to assist you, but make sure that the trailer is supported on jack stands underneath the frame. Once you've got it lifted up with your tires hanging off the ground, you can go ahead and remove the tires all the way around. If you don't have an impact to remove the tires, you want to make sure that you crack them loose with your wrench before you lift it up off the ground, or else it's going to be very difficult. Once you've got all the tires removed, we can put jack stands underneath our axles. We want one on each side for each axle, so we need 4 total for this setup, because we're going to have to be dropping these down to replace some components, but we don't want it to drop down too far because of our electric trailer brakes here. The wiring on the back here is only so long, so if we go down too far, we could potentially damage that wiring. We're also going to place our floor jack under the first area that we're going to be working so we can easily lift it up and down as need be. The jack stand's just there for support in case we lower it down, we've got something to set it on, or if we accidentally drop it, it's going to hit that stand and not fall all the way down. Once we've got a little support underneath of it with our jacks, we can control it. We're going to remove the nuts on our leaf spring here, so we can get this side and drop it down some. We're going to go ahead and take out the other nut here as well, because these are often tied together by a bracket, so normally you can't just take one out without taking the other one out. We're removing these nuts using an 18mm socket. We can then tap these out. Now, we're not going to be reusing them, but just in case you wanted to save them, you can thread the nuts just a little bit back on the ends. This way when you go to hit it with a hammer, you're not going to damage the threads. If you have no intentions on reusing them, then you can just hammer them right on out. And once you get so far, it may stop. You can just use a screwdriver or a punch, just a little something to tap it out. You can maneuver your jack up and down a little bit to help take off some tension, which can make it a little bit easier if they're really stuck. But if they're pushing out pretty easy like this with just little taps, just go ahead and tap it on out. The one over on this side is the same way. We're going to start it with the nut on there. And we can go ahead and pull that one out as well. And this is another one you may need to lift your jack up or down just a little bit to help free it up some. You can also use your screwdriver to finish punching it out as well. So we can now go ahead and lower down our axle onto our jack stands, and then we can repeat the same process on the rear axle. We can now take out our center equalizer. Just remove the nut in the middle. It's the same size as the rest of them. And just like we did before, we're going to punch it out. Now that we've got all this out of the way, we can move on to taking our bushings out. You can see this bushing here is already worn out. A chunk of the bushing is broken off. We're going to be replacing it with the new bushings that come in our kit. We'll first need to get the old bushing out, and we'll need to drive it out. You do not want to use your bushings to drive anything out, and you also want to use a tool to drive in your bushing because it is a soft metal. You can use a punch to drive it out. You could also use a similarly sized socket. We want to use one that's slightly smaller, and we're just going to tap it out. What I found works really well, since our kit comes with new hardware, is to use the old bolt that we just took out to drive the bushing out. The threaded end I don't recommend, but the shouldered end right here actually works perfect because you can push the threads up against it, and that shouldered end catches just the bushing, not your leaf spring, making it easy to just work it on out of there. Once you get it started, it usually pushes out fairly easily. We can now drive in our new bushing. You should use a bushing driver to drive it in, but if you don't have a bushing driver, a 9/16 bolt will work perfectly. Because we don't want to hit directly on the surface here because we can bend it, knock it down, and we'll have a really difficult time getting our new bolt in. But if we already have a bolt slid in there, we can use the head of the bolt to drive it in, and this will also ensure that we don't go beyond flush. We're then just going to go ahead and repeat that for the 3 remaining bushings. We can now install our new equalizer. The thicker bolt that comes in your kit, it has the same thickness of threads as the shaft there. We're going to take some anti-seize and just spread that around on the shaft of the bolt. And then we'll take our equalizer and our bolt. We're going to slide it up between our hanger there, and then slide our bolt through the equalizer, the hanger, and then out the opposite side. Once you've got it through those, we'll use our hammer to just tap it in because it's got the serrated ends there. And you could use the nut to pull it through, but the only problem with that is you could potentially pull the threads before it pulls the bolt in. So we don't want to damage the bolt, so we're just going to tap it in. And then on the opposite side, we'll install the locking nut. We can go ahead and just leave it loose for now, and we'll come back and fully tighten it down when we get the rest of our hardware loosely installed. We've now got our jack back underneath the back axle. We're going to lift up on it. Our back hole here is lined up, so we can go ahead and insert the bolt for that. That's going to be the single bolt with a grease fitting on the end. This just slides through our leaf spring as well as our existing bracket. And just like we did on the other side, we're going to tap this one in as well. Now we don't want to strike directly on the end because we'll damage our grease fitting, so we can use a socket which will fit over the grease fitting and then tap it in like that. Once that's pushed through, we can take the flange nut that comes with our kit and thread it on the other side. We can just loosely install this one here. The reason we're not putting anti-seize on the rest of our bolts is because they have grease fittings. We'll be greasing them at the end. Next, we're going to put in the equalizer side here with the shackles. So we just want to lift up on our axle until these line up to where we can easily slide them in. On the back side, we'll take the other shackle, place it over our bolts, and then loosely secure it with flange nuts. Once we've got this side loosely installed, we're going to repeat the same process on our front axle. We can then go back and tighten down all of our hardware with our 18mm socket. The only one that's going to be a different size is the center bolt. And then we'll use a 22mm for the larger center bolt. We can then go back and torque all of our hardware to the specifications found in our instructions. We can then grease all the grease fittings. It'll be easier with your wheels off to do so. Depending on the grease gun you got, you may or may not be able to grease these with the wheels on. But since we got it off, let's just get it done now where we know we can easily access them. You'll want to use a lithium complex grease, which you can get here at etrailer.com for all of your grease fittings. And we don't need to go crazy. We're just going to go a little bit in each one until we see just a smidge come out, just like we did there. And then we'll move on to the next one. And don't forget to grease the two fittings on top of your equalizer. You'll repeat the same process on the other side. Then you can reinstall your wheels, let the trailer down, torque them, and you're ready to hit the road. And that completes our installation of Dexter's E-Z Flex equalizers on your 2017 Grand Design Reflection.